Episode 317. You are my father? Her son was back. Her son was not dead. For real. Nola burst into tears and hugged Jake. Julianne still didn't quite understand what it meant. It was the first time she saw her grandmother crying. Her lips pursed and she cried as well. Wah! Jake held the little one in one hand and his mother with his other arm. He smiled and his eyes were red. Gently patting his mother's back, he smiled and said, "Don't cry, you're scaring the kids." "Grandma, don't cry." Julianne pouted, and her face was reddish. Her eyebrows and eyes were slightly pink, and her round face was wrinkled. Nola also smiled and reached out to Julianne. "Come to Grandma." Julianne went to her, and far away, she heard the sound of a cane hitting the ground. Captain Henrik came up with some imposing manners. Jake saw him and called, "Grandpa!" Hearing this, the old man's eyes were red. Taking the cane, he slammed it down at Jake's legs. Serena exclaimed, and so did Nola, going up. Jake took a hit and did not move. Instead, he stood straighter with a standard military posture. The old man hit him repeatedly hard with his cane. Serena immediately remembered that he was half dead in the warehouse 4 years ago. Her heart was sore and her tears rushed down. She ran forward to protect him and shouted, "Grandpa, don't hit him!" When going forward, Serena found that Grandpa had teared up. At this moment, he stopped by her, panting and putting his cane down. "Very well." Jake gently pushed Serena away and looked at the old man. "Grandpa, continue." The old man was even more angered and roared. "Do you really think that I dare not?" he said, picking up the cane and hitting him more. Jake's body was still motionless and straight. "Grow up! You grew up and abandoned your family, your wife, your kids, little bastard!" Every time he said a word, the cane went down. "Since you're still alive and have stayed away for 4 years, why don't you just die outside? Why are you coming back?" After a dozen or so hard strikes, both Nola and the kids were frightened. Jeremy and Seth were shocked, and Julianne simply cried, "Why are you hitting Dad, Grandpa?" Julianne cried and asked, "It hurts." Serena was heartbroken, but Jake did not let her come close, so she had to look at it. Hearing the voice of her daughter, Serena also cried. Finally, the old man was tired and stopped. Serena saw it and immediately went up. Seeing his body, her tears fell. "Does it hurt?" Jake took hold of her hand and shook his head gently. His voice soft, he said, "No." The old man wiped his eyes and snorted. "The big explosion didn't kill him. Now he can definitely take the beating." Serena pouted and did not speak, and silently clenched the hand of Jake, sobbing. "When your father comes back, I'll ask him to whip you. I'm so mad." The old man put the cane down, looking angry. Emma hadn't seen Jake for a long time. Her eyes red, she said, "Okay, the important thing is you're back. Grandpa, take a rest." The old man snorted and walked to the sofa with his cane. Finally done, Serena breathed a sigh of relief and looked at the two boys who had been standing still and waved at Jeremy. "Come over." Jeremy heard it but did not move, staring at the tall man next to Serena. Jake also looked at him with a pair of deep eyes. After gazing at each other for a long time, Jeremy first asked unkindly, "You are my father?" Jake heard the tone of the little guy, slightly raised his eyebrows, curled his lips, and asked, "What do you think?" Yes, no doubt. Since they were born, Serena had been showing them photos of Jake, pointing to the person in the photos and telling them, "This is Dad, this is your father." Moreover, this face was very similar to his own. Jeremy knew that he looked very much like this man. When the elders saw him, they would say, "This is the son of Jake, looking so much like him." Every time Jeremy responded politely, but only he knew that he didn't want to look like that person. Serena reminded them every time that Dad is not dead. Dad will come back sooner or later. Everyone thought she was going crazy, but he knew it was not true. He had heard the conversation between his little uncle and mother. They had been looking for the men. Although they found nothing, they were convinced that he was still alive. Not only that, he had also heard the conversation between his mother and his grandparents. He knew that the person was not dead. But why haven't you come back in so many years? Jeremy couldn't understand. If this man really had such deep feelings for his wife as everyone said, why wouldn't he come home? At this moment, hearing Jake's question, Jeremy felt more uncomfortable. Looking at Jake, he did not say anything. Serena noticed Jeremy was acting weird, walked over and said, "Call him father." Jeremy's small face wrinkled. He stared at Jake and shouted with his tender voice, "I don't want to." Then he turned, looked at Seth, and took his arm. "Seth, let's go inside and do our homework." "Jeremy!" Serena was somewhat unhappy. She grabbed the little guy's arm and said, "You can't do this. He's your father." "No!" Jeremy turned his head and had some grievances on his face. "Mom, I always thought that Uncle Henry would be our father. This person does not want you. Why do you want me to call him Dad?" Jeremy's words shocked everyone, including Serena. The little guy had already got rid of her hand and ran inside. Serena couldn't help but think of the time in the amusement park when she knelt on the ground and cried to Henry, "He doesn't want me."